Whoa! Is that the last time we're ever going to hear that music?
Yes. This is the very last This Week in Events, folks. I'll play the long version at the end, remind me, so that people get the long version. Yes, we have to have new music. Anyway, there we go. So, James, what's happening today?
Well, exciting stuff today. We're going to be talking about leadership. We're going to be talking about perhaps what may be happening next, because this is our last ever episode of This Week in Events. We're going to be talking about what we've maybe learned in this process and what may be coming up in the future. But our guest this week is a multinational CEO, having led The Body Shop, Pandora, and Carnival PLC. He is also the former managing director for L'Oreal UK and marketing director for Coca-Cola and Sainsbury's supermarkets. With experience covering diverse cultures, channels, and products, he has a unique perspective and insight on leadership. He gives business leaders concrete tools to make the extraordinary happen, with new ways to lead individuals and teams and create consumer-first companies that make more money and, most importantly, save tomorrow's planet. Please welcome Jeremy Schwartz.
Hello.
Hello, Jeremy. Nice to have you with us today.
And nice to be with you. Thank you.
So, leadership skills. Why do we need new leadership skills when maybe the old ones were perfectly fine?
Yeah.
Well, the old leadership skills were in some ways that we see in business, not in general leadership, because that's obviously centuries old, were created, around the Industrial Revolution. Much of what we do and think is leadership has come from that time. And that time was very much driven by a Taylorist approach, i.e. command and control, and getting workers to do a repeated piece of operation in the most efficient, productive way, consistently and reliably. Now, of course, with white-collar workers, that has changed a bit, but the basic principles are there. And yet we now are and have been going through, and not just because of the pandemic, well before that, 4 or so major disruptions, which are demanding that leaders embrace and learn and take on it themselves to learn new skills. And those 4 big disruptions are: one, around data, because data is the new oil, as we've discussed many times. The second one is around e-commerce and the complete shift in the way that people buy. The third one is globalization, but more the challenges, and we see it every day, between the new superpowers of China and the tensions that's creating, and potentially a move towards India and new alliances. And then the last one, and probably the most important, is the complete empowerment of the individual as a consumer to choose exactly what they want as they want, and in no way be a sort of follower of advertising of the big companies. And so those 4 things mean that speed and disruption and changing leadership of companies is moving quicker than ever before. And if you hang around and just do the same methods of leadership, it's likely the company that you're leading either will decline, or, as we've seen, in the UK during the pandemic, things like Topshop and Arcadia will simply disappear, unheard of as an idea, but it will happen if you don't embrace these thoughts.
And what leadership skills do you think then we need to, upcycle or add now, especially in this more kind of hybrid way of working? More of us now maybe having a conversation in the morning with a colleague in India, and then colleagues in Europe, and later in the afternoon, and a little bit later in maybe in the United States or Latin America. That used to be something that was just for kind of executives, but now it seems to be a much broader thing now with hybrid working.
Yes, it is. I mean, what I've done is to look at my whole career, 30 years, and look at the things that have worked, and then look outside at what is required to succeed, and then apply these things, particularly to some of my last jobs with great results. So out of that thinking has come 8 new leadership skills that are required to unlock what I've called extraordinary goals. And I can go through those in a minute, or we can I'll just pick one just to start. One that's quite topical in lots of companies. It's perhaps the first one, which is to really define what the purpose is of your company. Now, lots of people, when they hear that, will probably say, great, okay, well, we've heard all that before. But I have a particular take on that, which is that too often a company might have a mission and vision, which nobody knows, nobody cares, and is what I call writing on the wall. Some executive team did it, they were very proud, but it's completely ignored. So sometimes they've now moved some companies to writing a purpose, but they also think that the job is done once it's written and launched in the company, and then they go back to their own ways. Well, in a new approach to this as a leadership skill, in literally every meeting, and definitely in every budgeting, thinking, or strategic moment, but definitely on a daily basis, as a leader, you should refer to your purpose out loud with your employees and say, right, we're about to make a decision. How might this be affected by our purpose? And I'll give you a concrete example of where it becomes painful, and that's why it becomes a powerful leadership skill, which is at the Body Shop, we created a purpose which was to enrich, not exploit. And we were then faced with the minimum wage increasing and a decision as to what to do. Now, we had no choice to increase the minimum wage, but actually the minimum wage is different for somebody under 21 as over. Now, if we were truly living a purpose of to enrich, not exploit, why would we think it's appropriate to pay somebody under 21 a different rate to somebody over 21 simply because the law has made that delineation and simply because of age? Now, this may seem a small decision. Actually, to have and pay our employees the same rate in the UK was going to cost an incremental £500,000. So now I was faced as a leader with a purpose and a cost of a decision. And in the end, decided to pay that extra amount, because how could I have a purpose, expect people to live by it, if I couldn't make tough decisions as well as nice decisions as a result of it?
Wow. I love that. And I love the fact that the whole on a daily basis to come out, I'm going to do that. I'm going to focus on my purpose on a day. I don't do that. That's such good advice. I like that. You talked about your leadership unlocking extraordinary goals. Can you expand on that for me?
Yes. If we think about, from a business point of view, of course, what we're here to do in the end is a very singular thing. It's a very capitalist thing. It's a very simple thing. It is simply to sell more next year than we did this year, to make more profit this year than last year. That is what you're fundamentally rewarded on in the most simplistic way. Now, if you're a private company, you don't necessarily have to follow that to the letter, but all public companies expect that. And if you don't deliver that as a boss, you will be fired or removed by the investors. So it's pretty linear. Now, in a world where actually growth is becoming harder, not only because there's lots of markets that are saturated, even though you have the opportunity to globalize, a lot of that's happened for many companies, you now have the small disruptors who are changing everything from banking, which seemed totally secure, to airlines, to cosmetics, because they're coming with new business models. And the only way to lead in that environment is to imagine something that is extraordinary versus what you are doing, something that will require you to feel uncomfortable. It will actually probably make the hairs on the back of your neck rise, because you will feel in your gut also a sense of fear at the prospect of imagining taking your company into that place. But those companies that do will be rewarded, and those companies that don't will probably face demise or slowing down or their CEO being removed, because they won't get the growth and they will be attacked by somebody who is developing extraordinary goals. So let's try and think of a good example. I mean, if we think about banking, because that seems something that you didn't need to worry about such, if we look at brands like Monzo and Revolut, who have made it possible at the simplest level to actually just ring up, here's a small idea, or to be able to look at your bank account actually and have all of your expenses allocated by cost center automatically by an AI robot, so that you can see where you're spending your money. That from a technology point of view is pretty extraordinary. It's not a revolution, but no bank has done it until Monzo and Revolut and others came along. And if you don't do that, as has happened, those guys will start to gain share and particularly, let's say, recruit lots of young consumers. So it's not really a debate as to whether you should do this. It's just, have you got the guts and the willingness and the confidence and the courage? Because in the end, this is about courage to do it.
That's interesting. You've cited that as an example, the cost center for Monzo, and because now you're saying it seemed you used it as an extraordinary goal, but actually it makes total and utter sense. And why are the banks not doing that already? Some of this may actually just be total utter sense that you just take to the next level. Is that right?
It can be, and that's why, though, of course, the word extraordinary is really thinking something far more of of somebody that I idolize. So, how can you idolize another business person? Surely you idolize a pop star or a musician or a celebrity. My idol is Elon Musk, because, frankly, that on the other end, to imagine that you could create a rocket that can re-land, and he's now done one of his rockets has re-landed 17 times, when NASA, when the whole of China, when the whole of America, when the whole of Russia as governments were unable to achieve this or even imagine it, he imagined an extraordinary goal, which is to get a rocket to re-land back on Earth. Now, that's the other extreme. That's probably what would come to mind first, and quite rightly. But it doesn't have to be that big. It can be as seemingly trivial, but nonetheless extremely hard to execute if you don't imagine it and then decide to execute it within the IT systems that you have.
One of the leadership skills that you talk about is this focus on sustainability. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about that, especially from the perspective of, because you have led publicly traded companies as well. So can you talk a little bit more about this idea of sustainability and its impact upon leadership?
Yes. Well, I think, today, more than yesterday, more than a year ago, the idea that as a company and as a leader, you are not reorientating your business towards delivering a sustainable business, is laughable. Let's put it, I would actually use that word. Now, there are two approaches that you can take, and I'm actually the chairman of Kantar's Sustainability and Inclusion Practice. And so I'm having the privilege of speaking to many CEOs or corporate communication and environmental or sustainability leaders of major multinationals. And why this requires a specific leadership skill is because in order to create something truly sustainable in this world, as opposed to greenwashing or something that's nice but actually is not substantial, you have to actually set an extraordinary goal. You will disrupt your own business, and you will need to create a new business model, if I use that word, or let's just call it a new P&L that doesn't look quite like the one that you've been running the business for 50 years, because something will have to change. Now, it doesn't have to get worse. And one of the foolishes is this sort of idea that anything that's got sustainability linked to it will somehow reduce your profits. That might happen, but it's not a slam dunk it will. But it will probably change your P&L, and therefore you need to be able to take the business and all employees and your investors and your stakeholders and your suppliers on a journey from where you are today, which may be very comfortable, to a new place that will be different, maybe uncomfortable in the journey, but will save the planet, which is, I think, our obligation as leaders to do.
And in terms of investors, have you started feeling the heat on the back of the neck, now around ESG and sustainability, and it's being something that's really more factored into how companies decide, or how pension funds, for example, decide to invest in companies?
Yes, I'm going to give you two lenses to look at what's happening from the investor community, because BlackRock, for example, one of the largest private equity companies in the world, has been very vocal in the need and the obligation for their investments and for all companies to embrace sustainability. And then we've got various banks and pension funds who are, not going to invest in, or claim not to invest in fossil fuel companies, et cetera, et cetera. And that is, we hope, because they believe in it. And I'm going to take the benefit of the doubt they do. But if I take a slightly more cynical view of the investor community, just to share it with you so we get two perspectives, where is the money to be made? Well, there's money to be made in anything that's disruptive and new. And if you've got a new company that, let's say, creates, which won't sound so new now, but let's say a solar powered, or we've got Tesla as an example, or we've got any new, let's say, new cement has just been launched. Those new emerging companies are the places where money can be made, because if you will replace a whole existing industry with a brand new sustainable one, there's probably money to be made. So that will be another reason why they are, clapping this, or supporting it, which is great. But there will be two motivations.
And essentially, I just saw something today. It was about the price of new kind of lab-grown meat. So kind of going from traditional meat to plant-based kind of alternatives, now to the lab-grown, places like Israel, Singapore, really kind of pushing forward. And they're now they're getting pretty close to parity in terms of the price of a pound of chicken that's from a chicken, as opposed to a pound of chicken that's been grown in a laboratory as well. That really disrupts markets, because that pound of chicken that's grown in a laboratory is a third of the cost of the one that's grown in the field.
Yes. But the interesting thing will be that there won't be I'm also a non-executive director on a plant-based milk business. So, again, I've got a lens on that, just for your knowledge. What will be important to observe is that the companies who are creating all these innovations, so you will not have one of the largest meat companies in America creating any of these innovations, okay? It will be, again, a disruptor. So if you're running a big, meat processing company, if I use that awful language, but nonetheless, it's there, you will be doing everything you can to protect the status quo, because you don't want anything to cannibalize your business. Now, that may seem sensible, but it won't seem sensible when these new meat variants, let's say, are invented and grow faster than your business, and your business progressively shrinks as people say, well, actually, I'm quite happy with an artificially created piece of meat versus a cow that both is killed, which is cruel, let's say, and also pollutes the planet. And that's where the leadership skill is required to acknowledge and see what's happening around you and invest in it from an innovation point of view. And that's where so many leaders fail, because they're not willing to invest in the innovation in this area, for example.
It's going to present a brand new challenge, of course, then when you go to a restaurant and say, so I'm not a vegan, I'm not a meat eater, I'm a artificial, I don't know, what are you going to call it? It's going to have a new name, isn't it? So I'm not going to eat real meat, and I don't want to eat, I do want to eat, I'm not a vegetarian, but oh my goodness. Anyway, that's going to give me a headache tonight. So listen, according to our banner, which is that we've taken the words out of your mouth, everyone's a leader now. How so? How is that?
It is look, I want to share one thought, which is, of course, we're talking about leadership skills, but before there's a skill, there's something that goes on in your head, in every leader's head, in your head, in my head, which is a mindset. Now, a mindset is the filter by which you look at the whole world and all the decisions you're going to make. It's the lens through which your values are set. And if your mindset is that anybody who works below me or is working in a team is somehow below, is a manager, is an employee, that will be the way you view them, and they will respond in that way. And one of the groups that I find most negative and unhelpful within organizations that require change is the middle manager. Both of those words are not helpful, but the worst one is manager, because actually that is a great word in a tailorist business that is all about reproducing what they did yesterday better and more productively, and is absolutely necessary. But it's also about limiting and controlling and stopping a change. And we're in a world of change. So if we start with that group and we rename them middle leaders, I think we can completely reposition in their minds and the organization what the role of that person is to do. It is to manage, but it is also to lead. And that means taking the direction of the CEO or the business and interpreting it down at the next level and taking their employees on a journey somewhere different, being a leader. Now, I think what the pandemic has shown, and Zoom meetings and everything that we've seen, is actually many CEOs and business leaders have observed that they can trust their employees to do things that they never thought they could. They could entrust them to be self-leaders and to take initiative, to be trusted, to do the right thing. And through that are and will, I think, perform much better. So everyone's a leader now is, don't look upon yourself as an employee, as just a paid person, as just a manager. Look upon yourself as a leader, and you will help the business go forward as leaders need to, which is going from where you are now to a new place.
I like that. I was worried about what you're going to say when you were saying the problem is the middle managers. I was a bit concerned that you were going to say something about getting rid of them. So it's not about getting rid of them. It's just having them have a different mindset and a different role.
We could talk about that. I think, sadly, what I've observed, but it's for many reasons, but the title doesn't help, is that middle managers can be the blockers to innovation, can be the blockers to sustainability, can be the blockers to being consumer focused, because they see themselves in their own light to be there to control, there to protect themselves, there to not do anything that might disrupt their chances of staying in the company for many more years. So there is a lot of gravitas and baggage associated with that title and those people. But I want to look at it in a much more positive and enlightening and opportunistic way by rebranding them.
Okay.
Also, it's quite nice. I mean, I think sometimes you need a bit of punk in there as well. Like in the late 70s, you had all the disco and all these huge rock bands. It was all boring. And then you got some punk in and it just like mashed things up, and annoyed. I was going to say something else. It annoyed some people, and but it just kind of freshened it up. Yeah. And then suddenly that punk ethos, that DIY ethos, and you call it like a hacker ethos today, it got put in everything. In some of those obviously traditional organizations, they just disappeared. But some of those you kind of middle managers to they can upcycle themselves as well. You did something last week I was incredibly jealous of. You spoke at the first live in-person event in Liverpool in England, kind of almost obviously post-pandemic, not post-pandemic, last week. Can you tell us about that? Because I think every speaker is probably watching this just now is kind of, what does it feel like getting in front of a live audience?
Yeah. Penny Pullen's here. She wants to hear about it. So that's great. Hi, Penny.
Well, it was interesting because obviously it came as a call out the blue to say, look, we've got this event, a speaker event, as one would expect. And then suddenly they said, and we want you to be there. So that was like, okay, that's interesting. And it was only when they said it's in Liverpool, I said, gosh, that's going to be a 5-hour journey up and a 5-hour journey down. So that's different from our, let's turn on our Zoom camera. Yeah. Anyway, I headed off on a completely empty train, which in itself said something. Obviously arrived at Liverpool and then, walked into this auditorium where they said, we don't need to wear masks. We have got the scientists who are sucking up all the air and taking air samples. You have to have had a COVID test before entering the building, which obviously I had to do. And then, all those things like a green room and actually seeing other people and sitting and talking. And, what I've learned, and I'm sure we're all learning, is Zoom and like now is brilliant. It's almost perfect, except there is something really strange about seeing the full body of a person and connecting with somebody in their total. It's a different emotional connection. It's a different understanding of who that person is when you see them in totality. It's what we've spent, 100,000 years being used to. So we then were ushered onto the stage, and as you say, it was strange to turn your head from, or look in front of you and see not a lovely, perfect picture of, let's say, 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 faces, but actually a rather hazy look because, of course, all the stage lights were on us. And so it was more sort of peering out. And, of course, I tried to connect with people in individual faces as one does, and I did that to a few. And we were being asked questions, actually. And it is true that being asked questions on the spot and then turning and seeing 500 people all looking at you did feel a little bit more hairy or unexpected than it feels on Zoom somehow. So it definitely was a new emotion, but a good one, a nice one. And, one that we do need to go back to alongside Zoom as a very practical tool, but it's not something that can be forgotten and not continued with being live.
So the musician David Byrne, he did a great TED talk years ago talking about how the physical space that you're in can influence what you create. So he spoke about, like, if you're doing Mozart, a beautiful choral work, that music is influenced by the fact it was being performed in Austria in very rectangular kind of rooms. Other kind of choral work, big kind of ceilings, so you do longer notes. You go to a jazz club in a basement or a nightclub, bass. It's influencing the music that is actually creating the space. Is influencing what is being created. So, as you were giving your presentation, I'm fascinated by this. Did you have to change some things that maybe you previously delivered that same presentation virtually? Did you have to change anything for the in-person? If so, what was that?
Yeah, I think there were two things that come to mind just as you're asking the question. I think the first one, to complement your thought about the power of the space and the influence, is the power of one's own presence. When we listen to somebody, it is their words, but there is something that some people give off, which is an aura of them very itself. The height of them, something is emitted, which I don't think we get actually across from a Zoom meeting. But you very much get live. And I think I needed to position myself and reflect on what is the presence that I'm trying to portray, not just with my face and here, but obviously with my legs and arms, because all of those things communicate, even the color of your socks, which are suddenly visible and which you can't see. So I think, the fullness of who one was and the presence to fill that space was something I reflected on in the moment. Then the other thing is the need to project your voice in a different way, because of course here I'm talking to you relatively conversationally, But when you've got 500 people in a very large auditorium and you want the people in the back to hear you as much as in the front, I think, one thinks about your intonation as well. The thing I lost, and it's funny, is a little bit of that, the power of the eye contact, let's say. So let me tell you a story, just that's a little funny. I did make contact with one person, and they then contacted me on LinkedIn. So that was interesting to see that I could reach into the audience and get that eye contact, because they must have felt it because they contacted me. I think the other thing, of course, with Zoom, which we're slightly worried about, is anybody actually listening to you, or are they on their computer because the screens are the same? But actually the same thing happens live, which is a lot of people are on their phones, either politely taking notes or impolitely looking at their emails. And that was pretty obvious. So there's probably something there around your ability to really be in the moment with a speaker, as opposed to being distracted, which probably is happening in both environments.
And you have to wear trousers as well when you're on stage. Now, the one thing...
Well, shorts, because I thought, why break a habit of a lifetime? But that's another story.
Yeah, okay. Final question before we let you go, because I'm sure people will be curious to hear. What happens after? So you had to have a test before so that you could go in and you didn't have to wear masks. Surely they must be pursuing you and checking up on you now you've left the building.
Yes, we had to take another test the next day and send it in, and then we've had to take a test 1 week later. It was voluntary. I was a bit surprised by that. I think they would have been, in my view, quite in their rights, if I use that word, to insist that that was done. But that was done. I think, can I tell you, I've obviously had, not obviously, that would be the wrong expression. I have had the first vaccine, and obviously seeing the incredible, phenomenal results to the COVID impact of having the vulnerable majority of people vaccinated did dramatically increase my and others' confidence. There was a sense that it was safe because, all the people who were there who are of a certain age had been vaccinated, and younger people, I guess we're seeing, aren't so impacted. So it was funny how quickly it felt safe as an environment to be in versus when we weren't vaccinated and we saw how contagious and dangerous it was. So we move very quickly and adapt as humans very quickly to new circumstances. And that's how it did feel, actually.
Okay. We've had a question. If you've got time, could you tell us, this is Gary Halls. Hello, Gary. She would like to know, have you any thoughts on hybrid events, which would mean where you're in person and you're on Zoom or on being projected virtually?
Yeah, I hope that let me tell you a little story. I do a lot of courses. I've used this time, this Zoom world time, the lockdown, to do courses. And what's been just remarkable is to be on a Zoom-based course and to have the other people on the course from all over the world, from literally all over the world. And the connectivity of that, the reach of that, the simplicity of that is impressive. So frankly, I hope we do, if I come back to two things, reach and sustainability, create hybrids, because frankly, flying everybody in to a presentation, putting aside the human contact and the connections and so on, is not really viable. And I think one could create a brilliant hybrid. I think also you would probably get that energy that standing up and presenting to an audience. If we look at TED Talks on YouTube, they convey an energy, which this will convey hopefully, but perhaps isn't quite at the level of a TED Talk on YouTube because I'm not standing and I'm not engaging. So I think they would probably be a win-win to create a hybrid. Actually.
Brilliant.
It's a fascinating area. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for coming on. You've got me all thinking about leadership now. That's great. That's great. It's great, and I just wish as we kind of go on, more success. I know you've always got lots of different projects that you're working on just now as well. So thanks, especially as someone who's very keen on things like sustainability. I really wish you all the success with those projects.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you so much.
Good.
Oops, I think I cut him off as he was saying goodbye. I've got to make you smaller.
So, so many things I was just thinking in that. And I think Jerry actually mentioned, I saw it on the comments here, this idea of being present. I mean, we are, as speakers, we are presenters. We have to be present. That's part of what we're about. And so I think it'll be very interesting as we start to go into that kind of hybrid space where we have the audience in front of us. And so we're trying to make that eye contact, and you're doing your blocking and the traditional things that you would do working with it live in person. But you also kind of got an eye to where those cameras are. where is my close-up shot? Where is my wide shot? It's a very interesting time to be a speaker just now.
Yeah, and actually you answered that because I didn't read the whole of the question that Gary wrote. So thank you for picking that up. And Lawrence says that was brilliant. Thank you very much, Lawrence. So shall we remind everybody who our sponsor is?
Yes, take a moment now to thank our sponsors today, London Speaker Bureau. London Speaker Bureau is a global resource for corporations and governments for keynote speakers, executive learning masterclasses, and boardroom advisors, representing some of the most influential business leaders and politicians in the world. If you need help in choosing a speaker for your next event, go to londonspeakerbureau.com. And thank you, LSB, for sponsoring now 30 episodes, something that we've done.
I can't believe you're still counting. You're still counting.
So thank you, LSB, and all the team at LSB. I know, Maria, you and I, we know many of the team members all around the world. You know pretty much everyone in all the LSB offices. So thank you, LSB, for sponsoring this show.
Brilliant, brilliant. So I think what would be really nice for us, because having done these live streams, which for me it was it's the first time I've done a regular live stream television show, if you like. I'll call it television, although we're obviously not on TV as such. I thought it'd be really nice to talk about what we've learned in case anybody's fancying doing that. So if you were to pick up sort of one or two things that you've learned from this experience, what would you say that you would then apply for future live streams?
Well, I think the first thing, maybe the most obvious thing, is it's always much more fun with another person.
You've pinched my idea.
But it's true. I mean, and I think this goes to consistency, and you and I have spoken about this consistency before. You know, there's weeks, let's be honest here, where sometimes if you were just doing this show on your own, you're like, maybe I should miss this week. Maybe I should go and do something. But when you have committed to someone else and you have to kind of be on, then you turn up. And the other person, you know, you get a sense, you know, energy-wise, maybe one person's had a really full-on week, the other person's got more energy, and so you kind of play with that. So I think the having two people doing a show like this is definitely one of the biggest ones as well. The other one was, I think, and this is, I've got so much more respect now when I see daytime TV presenters that work together a lot, because, you know, I know you and I, we met once before we did the show. Once, so we kind of got to know each other through doing this show better. But in those if you look back at those first episodes, goodness help you if you have to look back at them. But I know we were talking over each other all the time. We didn't find our flow probably until maybe episode 5 or 6, I think. So that was the other thing, is just giving yourself a little bit of time to find. I can almost instinctively can feel now when I know, Maria's going to have a great follow-up for this, so I'm going to stay out of the way. And we've kind of worked out little ways to know not to talk over each other, hopefully.
We still do it, and I certainly still do it, and I'll tell you why. It's an Italian thing. An Italian, when it's something I've never lost. When an Italian is enthusiastic and engaged and really enjoying a conversation, we have to sort of get in and talk at the same time. And so when you see loads of Italians talking all at the same time, it's because they're having a really great discussion and they're all passionate about it. So it's actually not a natural thing for me not to talk over you. So when I talk over you people, when I'm having a conversation with you on the phone or on Zoom or in person, it's because I'm really engaged. So the other thing I've learned actually is having a guest, because when we started, we didn't have guests. It was just the two of us. And having a guest absolutely changes the dynamic completely, brings in a completely different perspective. And again, now we've got 3 people, and sometimes we've had more than 3, where you mustn't talk over. But I found it a lot easier to have a guest to help us, you know, have other content as well and shine a light on somebody else. I would certainly recommend that. And I've always done that, for example, in my podcasts. I've always had a guest because I wouldn't want to show up on my own. So we've done that too. And it is interesting as well, because I think we've actually got quite good chemistry on screen, and probably not in person, but on screen it works.
But it's funny this. I mean, you only discover this stuff when you work with someone. It's like having been a musician. I know there's certain musicians I can play with, and it just kind of like locks in very early. It doesn't feel like work at all. Where there's other musicians, it doesn't have that same lock initially. It's interesting because they might challenge you in a different way, but it doesn't feel quite as natural. And I think, you know, you and I We have different perspectives on things, which always makes it interesting. So, but we can sense sometimes where things are going.
Yeah, and actually, well, the other thing I really appreciate about you is the fact that you've always got an interesting story. I'm not so good on stories, and you're really good on stories. Yeah, so and I just keep you in order and keep you to time. But yes, I love your stories, so I really enjoy those. I've learned so much about all sorts of people that you've met, and you've got a great memory. So you tell the stories. See, I can't do that because I don't remember.
I'm not very good at telling jokes, though. Everyone I know that tells really good. My father's great at telling jokes, and he's got this great memory for jokes. I can never remember any jokes. What does everyone else think? Hopefully everyone's been enjoying these episodes as we've been doing them. We'd love to get some comments. What have you liked during the past 30 episodes? What maybe you want us to change? Because should we maybe talk about what we might be doing next?
Yeah, there was a few people were a bit upset. They're saying, what do you mean it's the end? I've only just discovered this week in events. What are you going to do? Well, we are changing things. So we're going to take a few weeks off to have a rest and to prepare something very special for you. The next incarnation of our show is actually going to be aimed specifically at speakers. So we're going to be helping both speakers who are established and those starting out, and sharing our collective knowledge. James as a successful speaker in his own right, me with my speaker bureau experience, and we're going to be focusing on that. And again, we're going to have guests, aren't we?
Yeah. But here's the interesting thing. This show started because of the title, This Week in Events. We thought we were starting a show for event professionals, for conference organizers, meeting professionals. And so we kind of started there, and very quickly you kind of get feedback from people and you find out what works and what you enjoy speaking about. And it kind of just felt it was moving more towards, and obviously we have businesses that kind of support speakers and help and coach speakers. So it just felt it was naturally kind of moving a little bit more towards there as well. So hopefully the content we're going to be creating next for you in this show, if you're a speaker, is going to be much, much more on point.
It's going to be brilliant. And in fact, Lawrence was saying, thank you so much. I'll miss this, but don't, Lawrence, because there'll be something else. And Clive Woodward was his favorite. Don't tell the others. Do not tell the others. He was good. In fact, every guest we've had has been amazing. Yeah. We've been so lucky. So that's what's happening next. And so watch this space, and we're going to be moving to a Tuesday, and we are interested to hear from you. If you are a speaker and you're going to be tuning in live and asking questions, tell us what time you'd like us to go live, because we haven't set that yet. Yeah. We just decided we're going to go earlier in the week. So do let us know. So Levi, thank you. I really enjoyed these sessions. Thank you. I really found Tool of the Week very valuable. We might have to go back to Tool of the Week related specifically to speakers. We might do that.
I think we should do that. I know we had Tool of the Week, then we had Tip of the Week. We were kind of, this is an evolving process doing a show like this.
It is.
But here's a nice thing. And Maria, I'm hat off to you here. I think we had this idea for doing this show, you and I, and we executed on the first episode of that within under 2 weeks, I seem to remember.
10 days.
10 days. So if you're watching this just now and you think, I've actually really enjoyed this show, instead of being a consumer, be a creator. Maybe find someone, maybe you speak on a topic, you find someone else that speaks on another topic, but you just enjoy working together. Create your own show. There's loads of voices out there as well. So sometimes I think we kind of put a lot of pressure on it. It has to be this big thing to start, but sometimes just do it. Give yourself 10 days, and like mad people like us, like Maria and I.
Yeah, and actually, when you do go back, as you say, from the first episodes, you think, oh my goodness, cringe. And you know, I still haven't got it right, where I bring the guest in, and I still haven't worked out on this platform after 30 episodes I have by many, how to make the guest big when they come on and not, anyway, never mind. I don't think I'm ever going to master that, but still. So thank you very much, Alistair. Good job, guys. Looking forward to the new pizzazz. Thank you, Alistair. Lawrence is saying, working in Marcoms, the insight you share can be used both on a platform as well as developing relationships with stakeholders. Look forward to seeing you again. Wonderful. How lovely. Wonderful. I'm feeling the love. Are you feeling the love?
Absolutely. And thanks everyone for watching this show. Maybe this is your very first episode. Apologies. We're going to finish. And if you're just like, oh, you can go back and watch it. If you go to thisweekinevents.com, you can watch some of the previous, get links to some of the previous episodes. But we're going to have a really exciting thing. So either if you sign up to thisweekinevents.com, we'll make sure that you know when this new show is coming out. We haven't got a name. Maybe you'd like to email us, message us, put a message on LinkedIn, maybe put some ideas here below. What should we call this thing? I don't know. I don't know what we're going to call this new show.
I've got an idea. Okay, super. Well, listen, all's left to say is bye-bye. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.